You know, when you hear the year 1776, you probably think of the Declaration of Independence, right? A real moment of triumph and defiant birth. But the second half of that year was, well, it was something else entirely. It was the moment the American Revolution came closer to complete and total failure than at any other time. This is the story of how it was almost all lost, and somehow how it was saved. So picture this, it's the summer of '76, and a massive shadow is falling over New York. Britain has just unleashed the largest expeditionary force it had ever put together. The harbor is just choked with warships and transports, and pretty soon, 20,000 professional soldiers, we're talking British redcoats and those feared German Hessians, are on the ground, ready to just completely crush this rebellion in one single decisive campaign. And the matchup? Honestly, it was a joke. On one side, you've got the most powerful professional military machine on the planet, and on the other, you've got George Washington's Continental Army. Most of these guys were undertrained, they were terribly equipped, and people were deserting left and right. And what's worse, their camps were just riddled with disease, like typhus and dysentery. I mean, at this critical moment, nearly a quarter of Washington's soldiers were too sick to even stand, let alone fight. So with that kind of overwhelming force on one side, what happened next was, well, it was probably inevitable. The British just unleashed their army, and for the Americans, the result was a swift, brutal, and frankly humiliating series of disasters. The first big fight was the Battle of Long Island in August. And for a minute, the Americans were actually holding their own, until they suddenly heard gunfire coming from behind them. See, the British general had found this little-known path and swung 10,000 men completely around their flank. The American lines just collapsed into total chaos. From a nearby fort, Washington could only watch in horror as some of his very best troops were cut to pieces. He lost over 2,000 men. It was an absolute catastrophe. So now Washington's army is trapped. Their backs are literally to the East River, and the British are getting ready to lay siege. This should have been it. This should have been the end. But in an incredible stroke of both luck and genius, Washington organizes this silent, overnight evacuation. Under the cover of total darkness and then this freakishly thick fog in the morning that hid them from the British fleet, his entire remaining army was ferried across the river to safety. He dodged a bullet for sure, but the onslaught was really only just getting started. And the collapse was just relentless. Just a couple of weeks after Long Island, the British land at Kips Bay, and the Continental Army, they just melt away. They literally run for the hills. Washington himself tries to rally them, and they just ignore him. Then came another defeat at White Plains. And then a terrible blunder. An isolated garrison of 2,800 men at Fort Washington gets surrounded and is forced to surrender. In just a few months, the army was completely shattered. Now, this wasn't just a military crisis, it was a crisis of confidence. American morale just hit rock bottom. And get this, even Washington's own second-in-command, General Charles Lee, was writing letters behind his back, openly questioning his leadership. A lot of people in Congress and the Army were actually starting to think, you know what, maybe Lee is the guy who should be in charge. So with New York completely lost, Washington is forced into this desperate retreat across New Jersey, with the British right on his heels. And it was right here, in the freezing cold of early winter, that the revolution itself just seemed to be dissolving into thin air. As Washington was falling back towards the Delaware River, his army was just evaporating. He had hoped to get new volunteers from New Jersey, but instead, nobody wanted to join. They were terrified. His entire force had dwindled to fewer than 6,000 men. The British commander, General Howe, saw this, and he made a really smart move. He offered a full pardon to any rebel who would swear a new oath of allegiance to the king. And the response was just overwhelming. Thousands of people across New Jersey and New York lined up to abandon the cause. This even included Richard Stockton, one of the guys who had literally signed the Declaration of Independence just a few months before. I mean, for regular folks, the war looked like it was over. The rebels had lost. The smart play was to get a pardon from the king and just save your family. Sticking with the revolution looked like a suicide mission. And then, on December 1st, just when you think it couldn't get any worse, it does. The enlistments for half of Washington's remaining army expired. And without even a second thought, 2,000 men, a third of his entire force, just packed their bags, got their pay, and went home. The army wasn't just being defeated. It was literally ceasing to exist. So by mid-December, Washington is across the Delaware River in Pennsylvania. His second-in-command, General Lee has been captured by the British at a tavern, of all places. And the enlistments for all his remaining soldiers, they're all set to expire at the end of the month. The American Revolution was weeks, maybe even days away from just being over. With everything falling apart, Washington decides he has to risk it all. He knew if he did nothing, his army would simply vanish when the new year came. He had to stake the entire future of the cause on one last, totally audacious and completely desperate attack. And the plan was as bold as it was crazy. On Christmas night, in the middle of a blizzard, he was going to ferry his army back across that treacherous, ice-filled Delaware River and hit the Hessian garrison at Trenton at dawn. And this wasn't some simple raid either. It was a really complex, three-pronged attack. 3 separate groups were supposed to cross the river at different spots and all converge on Trenton at the exact same time. Success depended on perfect timing and perfect coordination, all in the dark during a massive winter storm. And almost immediately, the whole plan fell apart. The river was just too choked with ice, the storm was too severe, the 2 southern columns, they couldn't make it across. They just gave up and turned back. Only Washington's main force actually made it to the New Jersey side, hours behind schedule, and now completely on their own. Now, any other commander probably would have aborted the mission right then and there, but Washington decided to push on. His thinking was, the weather is so awful, the Hessians will never, ever see this coming. And what happened next? Well, it changed the entire course of the war. The attack was a total surprise and a massive success. In less than an hour, it was all over. The Americans captured or killed nearly 1,000 Hessians. In their own casualties, they had 5 men wounded. It was just a stunning, desperately needed victory. But the fight wasn't over yet. The Army's enlistments were still set to expire in just a few days. So Washington gathered his victorious but totally exhausted troops, and he made this personal appeal. He offered them a bonus, sure, but more than that, he appealed to their honor, to their duty, asking them to please stay for just 1 more month. And almost all of them agreed. And with his army intact for just a few more weeks, Washington didn't retreat. When the main British army under General Cornwallis came after him, Washington slipped away in the middle of the night, marching his men around the British flank to strike another garrison at Princeton. He personally led the charge and again pulled off another shocking victory. The impact of what we now call the 10 crucial days really can't be overstated. These 2 little victories completely flipped the momentum of the war. They saved the Continental Army from just dissolving, they reignited patriot morale all across the colonies, and they forced the British to abandon most of New Jersey. And they proved that Washington was a leader capable of true brilliance. But maybe the most important thing is this. Trenton and Princeton proved that this ragged amateur Continental Army could actually go toe-to-toe with professional European soldiers and win. That psychological barrier was broken. The cause was no longer hopeless. And this newfound hope wasn't just being felt in America. All the way over in the royal courts of Paris and Madrid, leaders who would love nothing more than to see their old rival Britain get humiliated were starting to take notice. These small victories in the New Jersey winter suggested that, hey, maybe this American rebellion was actually worth supporting. The war was about to go global.